Picture a colossal metallic heart, the heavy and unyielding core of a shattered world, silently gliding through the absolute freezing dark under the faint light of distant stars. Imagine a mountain composed entirely of loose gravel and ancient dust, held together not by solid stone, but by a gravitational whisper so fragile that a single jump could send you drifting into the void forever. Deep within the shadows between Mars and Jupiter, these bizarre gravity-bound ghosts are locked in a slow, eternal clockwork that has ticked perfectly for over 4 billion years. Surprisingly, the true nature of this cosmic expanse completely defies the terrifying, chaotic visions we have been taught to expect since childhood. If we were to look closer at this sprawling ring of debris, we would find an ocean of profound, overwhelming emptiness rather than a grinding storm of destruction. This cosmic structure is actually a peaceful, perfectly preserved museum of our solar system's violent birth, where solitary wanderers are separated by millions of miles of untouched, silent vacuum. Every iron beam and drop of water on our own world shares a common ancient ancestry with these lonely, drifting stones. To journey out into this remote territory is to witness the chaotic building blocks of a ghost planet, eternally prevented from coalescing by Jupiter's relentless gravity. This immense emptiness is a staggering philosophical void that forces us to completely recalibrate our earthly intuition about distance, matter, and the fragile nature of our own serene biosphere. Notice the heavy, comforting pull of your own mattress as your steady breathing becomes the only engine you need to cross this magnificent and lonely sea. You are safe. These wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep. As you let go of the waking world, release the loud, crowded illusions of the celestial landscape we're about to explore. We are leaving the noise behind to discover a serene, breathtakingly lonely beauty suspended permanently in the deep black. Popular cinema has long painted the asteroid belt as a treacherous tumbling minefield of jagged rocks, where starship pilots must swerve frantically to survive a crossing. Popular cinema has long painted the asteroid belt as a treacherous tumbling minefield of jagged rocks, where starship pilots must swerve frantically to survive a crossing. We are conditioned from childhood to envision a dense, chaotic swarm of boulders constantly grinding against one another in the freezing dark. The reality of this cosmic expanse, however, is far more serene and infinitely more isolating than any fictional portrayal. Stepping into the actual main belt reveals a profound, overwhelming emptiness that completely defies our terrestrial instincts regarding scale and density. This region is a breathtaking monument to the sheer volume of the solar system, a place where the pristine void itself is the dominant geographical feature. Rather than a crowded interplanetary highway, it is a vast, silent, and virtually unpopulated desert, stretching for hundreds of millions of miles. To successfully traverse this space in a vessel is to sail through an unbroken ocean of nothingness, where the nearest celestial neighbour remains entirely invisible to the naked human eye. The true nature of the belt is not one of kinetic danger, but rather a terrifying, beautiful isolation suspended in the deep black. It is a planetary architecture built almost entirely out of unfathomable absence. Measurements of this cosmic desolation quickly stretch far beyond the capacity of intuitive human comprehension. If we were to calculate the average physical separation between any two sizable bodies in this region, the distance spans roughly 1 to 3 million miles of open vacuum. To put this staggering arithmetic into a terrestrial perspective, that gap represents anywhere from 4 to 12 times the total distance between the Earth and our Moon. Such immense, unbridgeable gaps dictate that each asteroid exists in a state of absolute unbreakable solitude as it orbits the Sun. A mechanical probe flying completely blindly through the orbital plane possesses almost zero mathematical probability of ever striking a rock by sheer accident. The space agencies of Earth routinely launch their fragile spacecraft directly through the allegedly thickest parts of the main belt without a single second thought regarding collision avoidance. Navigating this zone actually requires deliberate, painstaking effort and precise trajectory calculations to intercept an asteroid rather than to evade one. This million-mile quarantine ensures that each ancient frozen relic remains undisturbed by its distant peers across the slow turning of the eons. They are solitary stone islands, forever separated by an unimaginably wide, dark and merciless gulf. Standing upon the dusty, heavily cratered surface of a typical main belt asteroid would be an overwhelming exercise in sensory deprivation. Gazing out toward the immediate horizon, your human eyes would meet nothing but the cold, unforgiving blackness of deep space studded with ancient distant stars. You would search the heavens completely in vain for the looming silhouette of a neighbouring rock drifting slowly past your lonely vantage point. The neighbouring members of your immediate asteroid family are simply too physically small and too impossibly far away to reflect enough sunlight for your retinas to perceive them. Without the dedicated assistance of a powerful specialised telescope, you would be forgiven for genuinely believing your rock was the only solid object remaining in the entire universe. The jet-black sky stretching out above would offer no floating mountains, no rotating debris fields, and no nearby companions to marvel at. This complete and utter visual isolation perfectly underscores the true, mathematically sparse nature of the main belt's grand planetary layout. You're effectively a cosmic castaway stranded upon a microscopic stone raft, adrift in a completely featureless ocean of harsh starlight. The spectacular panoramas of densely packed boulders exist exclusively in the realm of human imagination, replaced permanently by a majestic, haunting void. Sweeping all of these floating metallic mountains and icy boulders into a single, localized pile would yield a surprisingly insignificant cosmic pebble. If we could somehow magically gather every single rock, dust grain, and massive dwarf planet in the main belt, their entire combined mass is almost astonishingly small. This grand, spanning collection of primordial material totals only roughly 4% of the total mass of our own familiar moon. We often incorrectly think of the belt as a massive heavy ring of dense planetary construction material, but it is truly a thin, ethereal scattering of lightweight crumbs. The vast majority of the original rocky mass that once resided in this stable orbit was mercilessly expelled or violently consumed billions of years in the past. What remains drifting here today is merely the faintest, whispering ghost of a rocky planetary shell that never actually had the opportunity to fully form. This severe structural lack of physical material perfectly explains why no true, full-size terrestrial planet could ever successfully coalesce in this specific, troubled region of the solar system. The vital chemical ingredients were spread far too thin by gravitational forces, leaving behind only a meagre collection of isolated leftovers. It is a profoundly sparse, lightweight kingdom, characterized entirely by the immense volume of what is currently missing, rather than what is actually present. Deep within this hollowed celestial architecture, an uncountable multitude of forgotten rock fragments continues an endless, quiet march around our distant central star. Modern astronomical estimates confidently suggest there are millions of these distinct rocky bodies, ranging from the immense size of small terrestrial cities down to mere jagged pebbles, all charting their own paths. They move constantly with incredible kinetic velocity, yet the absolute unyielding stillness of their immediate environment makes their journey seem paradoxically motionless to an outside observer. Plunging relentlessly through a near-perfect vacuum, these ancient travellers encounter absolutely no atmospheric friction, no roaring gaseous winds, and no aerodynamic resistance to slow their eternal momentum. The dark space they continually occupy is stripped entirely of breathable air and physical pressure, presenting a pristine emptiness that preserves their orbital trajectories with flawless mathematical precision. This magnificent, flawless vacuum acts as a perfect, completely frictionless theatre for the complex mechanics of orbital dynamics to play out over uncountable eons. Every silent rotation and sweeping revolution happens in a state of supreme, undisturbed quiet that borders on the holy. They are locked securely in a persistent, invisible forward fall, suspended gently by gravity in a perfectly transparent silent medium. It is an endless marathon run completely within a sensory void, serving as a beautiful testament to the perpetual motion inherent in the clockwork of celestial mechanics. Examining these silent, drifting wanderers is profoundly akin to opening a perfectly sealed time capsule buried at the very dawn of astronomical creation. This incredibly scattered collection represents the raw, unadulterated primordial debris directly left over from the violent, chaotic formation of our solar system some 4.5 billion years ago. They are the original, untouched bricks and mortar of terrestrial planetary construction, casually discarded and left afloat perpetually out of reach. While the Earth and its massive sister planets underwent agonizing geological transformations, constantly melting and reforming through intense volcanic fire, these asteroids remained largely untouched. Their internal structures and preserved surface chemistries beautifully retain the exact volatile conditions of the original solar nebula, securely locking away the fundamental secrets of our deep cosmic past. They have not suffered the violently erasing effects of atmospheric weather, grinding tectonic plates, or persistent biological interference over the millennia. Looking closely at a piece of the main asteroid belt is quite literally looking backward through the dark corridor of deep time. These humble, highly irregular rocks hold the original, unaltered blueprint of the solar system, written legibly in layers of ancient dust and frozen radioactive isotopes. They are the magnificent, unedited, rough drafts of habitable worlds that currently exist only in shattered, frozen pieces. The harsh climate in this desolate, sprawling stretch of space is completely dominated by a brutal, unforgiving and perpetual cosmic cold. Because these fragments orbit so phenomenally far from the warming, life-giving embrace of the sun, surface temperatures across the main belt routinely plummet to -100 degrees Fahrenheit or even lower. Any meagre heat absorbed during a brief sunlit rotation is almost instantly radiated away into the endless, hungry night. This extreme thermal environment acts as a magnificent solar system-sized preservation system for incredibly delicate primordial chemical compounds. The agonizing, perpetual deep freeze completely arrests molecular degradation, trapping ancient water ice, fragile organic molecules, and highly volatile gases safely within the dark, rocky matrices of the asteroids. It is a flawlessly natural cryogenic vault that successfully prevents the scouring solar wind from boiling away the chemical history of the early universe. Were these primitive bodies situated just a fraction closer to the warm inner planets, their precious icy cargo would have completely sublimated into empty space eons ago. Instead, the crushing ambient cold guarantees their chemical survival, turning each porous, tumbling boulder into an indestructible cosmic icebox. The frigid temperatures are not merely an environmental hazard, but the very mechanism that keeps our deep solar history beautifully intact. Surprisingly, the deep universe does not provide a soundtrack for the incredibly violent events that occasionally punctuate this quiet region. Because the pristine vacuum of open space completely lacks the dense atmospheric molecules required to propagate acoustic waves, sound simply cannot exist or travel here. When two massive ancient rocks eventually cross orbital paths and violently strike one another, the resulting devastation occurs in an eerie, absolute and unyielding silence. A hypothetical observer could witness a mountain-sized boulder shattering completely into 1,000,000 jagged pieces without hearing so much as a faint whisper of the catastrophic impact. The tremendous, world-breaking kinetic energy is released entirely as sudden heat, blinding flashes of light, and severe kinetic fracturing, while the auditory realm remains totally undisturbed. This sensory disconnect makes the rare moments of absolute destruction seem almost intensely surreal, exactly like a chaotic cinematic explosion played forever with the volume completely muted. The utter permanent lack of sound brilliantly amplifies the profound isolation of the belt, entirely stripping away the auditory cues we terrestrial beings rely upon to gauge power and proximity. There are no thunderous echoes to warn of an approaching danger, nor any deep rumbling vibrations to signify a recent catastrophe. It is a theatre of pure visual consequence, where the loudest events in planetary history pass without a single decibel of noise. The visual landscape of the asteroid belt is defined by a peculiar, high-contrast illumination that is fundamentally alien to human eyes. Because these rocks drift between 2 and 4 astronomical units away from the Sun, the sunlight reaching them is significantly dimmer and vastly weaker than the light that bathes the Earth. Our star appears merely as a piercingly bright point in the black canopy, completely lacking the warm, scattered glow of our familiar daytime sky. These long, ink-black shadows stretch dramatically across the wildly uneven terrain, severely exaggerating every jagged cliff and impact crater. The weak but piercing illumination paints a stark, monochrome portrait of a dead world, beautifully frozen in high definition. It is a severe lighting environment that hides as much as it reveals, wrapping the ancient geology in sharp ribbons of total obscurity. It is easy to look upon this scattered cosmic graveyard and incorrectly assume it is a realm detached from the active mechanics of the solar system. Yet, despite the unfathomable vastness and the agonizing isolation of each rock, they are far from being truly independent wanderers. These objects are permanently locked in a continuous, incredibly delicate gravitational dance, orchestrated primarily by the overwhelming mass of Jupiter and the Sun. The distant gas giant Jupiter acts as a relentless, invisible shepherd, its massive gravitational tides constantly sweeping through the belt and pulling invisibly at every stone. The Sun pulls them steadily inward with crushing authority, while Jupiter's rhythmic tug prevents them from ever settling into a singular, unified planetary orbit. This invisible, eternal tug-of-war actively creates a dynamic, ever-shifting web of orbital resonances that mathematically dictates the ultimate fate of every orbiting particle. Their seemingly random distribution is actually a highly structured, precise choreography that has been continuously playing out for billions of years. Though they float millions of miles apart in absolute silence, they are firmly tethered to the largest gravitational engines of our cosmic neighborhood. The freezing void may physically separate them, but the unbreakable bonds of gravity weave this empty sea into a single, breathtakingly complex system. Within this breathtakingly complex system of scattered fragments, one solitary, majestic titan reigns supreme over the endless fields of frozen dust. Ceres stands as the undisputed monarch of the main belt, a colossal, spherical anomaly that completely defies the diminutive, fractured nature of its jagged neighbours. It is not merely a massive rock drifting in the dark, but rather the only officially recognised dwarf planet, residing within the entire inner solar system. Unlike the rough, irregular splinters of stone that violently dominate this particular orbital region, this massive body possesses an imposing, undeniable planetary presence. Its sheer physical scale demands a completely different geological classification, cleanly separating it entirely from the countless minor bodies sharing its lonely, frigid neighbourhood. To visually approach this colossal world is to encounter a true planetary embryo, a magnificent survivor that miraculously weathered the chaotic demolition derby of the early cosmos. The staggering physical dimensions of this dwarf king profoundly overshadow almost everything else currently drifting in the vast empty void stretching outward toward the gas giants. It presents a dark, incredibly dusty silhouette against the eternal starlight, acting as a silent, spherical guardian tirelessly watching over a kingdom of shattered rubble. Here, squarely in the heart of the ancient debris field, it offers a startling, beautifully preserved glimpse of what an almost finished terrestrial world truly looks like. The immense physical heft of this single, dominating object accounts for nearly a staggering 1/3 of the total mass contained within the entire orbital band. Such an overwhelming concentration of primordial material generates an inescapable gravitational field that is exponentially more potent than the incredibly weak pulls of typical smaller fragments. This formidable localized gravity has spent billions of years relentlessly crushing the body's own internal rocky and icy substance inward upon its dense core. Over unfathomable eons of slow geological time, this persistent gravitational crushing force effectively smoothed away any jagged, irregular edges to form a remarkably balanced, elegant shape. The immense internal pressure mathematically forced the entire mass into a state of hydrostatic equilibrium, pulling itself inevitably into a beautifully rounded, near-perfect sphere. This flawless spherical geometry is the ultimate testament to its structural dominance, an architectural feat physically impossible for the lighter, irregularly shaped rubble piles surrounding it. Gliding smoothly across the bleak, heavily cratered charcoal grey surface of this spherical world reveals a profoundly unexpected visual anomaly that once completely baffled terrestrial astronomers. Startlingly bright, highly reflective patches mysteriously dot the shadowy floor of a massive ancient impact basin currently known to planetary science as the Akata crater. From a great distance in the freezing void, these luminous glowing splotches almost appear as if an artificial brilliant spotlight has been left burning intentionally in the darkness. High-resolution spectral analysis eventually revealed the fascinating truth that these glowing white patches are not composed of alien ice, but rather incredibly dense concentrations of sodium carbonate salts. These highly reflective crystalline mineral deposits are spread expansively across the depressed crater floor, eagerly catching the faint distant starlight and beaming it sharply back into the void. Their stark, blinding white brilliance sharply contrasts against the ancient, heavily weathered dark dust that thickens and coats the rest of this silent celestial sphere. The presence of such incredibly specific, highly concentrated chemical salts resting exposed on a barren surface points to a remarkably complex and unexpectedly dynamic geological history. They serve as the glowing chemical fingerprints of a world that is fundamentally not entirely solid rock, strongly hinting at exotic fluid processes bubbling just beneath the crust. These glittering crystalline plains remain one of the most visually captivating and scientifically significant geological features yet discovered in the deep, freezing shadows of the belt. The sudden, startling discovery of these glittering carbonate fields completely rewrote our fundamental, established understanding of this supposedly dead, eternally frozen rock floating in the void. Planetary geologists now confidently understand that these localized, brilliant salt deposits are the evaporated remnants of an immense, briny ocean that once existed entirely underground. Deep beneath the incredibly dark, heavily cratered exterior crust, a vast churning reservoir of liquid, mineral-rich water churned completely hidden from the freezing absolute vacuum of space. Violent, catastrophic impacts occasionally fractured the thick, protective outer crust, allowing this pressurized, salty, subterranean sludge to violently erupt upward onto the frigid, unforgiving surface. As the exposed liquid water rapidly boiled away and sublimated in the airless void, it left behind only the dense, highly reflective salt crusts we observe gleaming today. These glowing, magnificent scars strongly suggest that pockets of this dark, briny alien sea might still stubbornly persist deep within the dwarf planet's slowly warming mantle. Such a profound revelation instantly elevates this spherical giant from a simple rocky relic into a dynamic, chemically active ocean world masquerading cleverly as a dry wasteland. It is a stunning, beautiful paradox to find the undeniable chemical signatures of a vast marine environment trapped securely within a region strictly defined by its dusty emptiness. The silent, spectacularly sparkling crater floors are the dried-out, crystalline ghosts of an ancient underground alien sea that once raged in the dark. As you deliberately let your tired muscles sink deeper into deep relaxation, releasing any lingering physical tension, marvel softly at the hidden activity churning within seemingly dormant things. Modern, highly sensitive orbital observatories have conclusively detected faint, ephemeral plumes of actual water vapour gently wafting directly from specific localized regions of this enigmatic world. This astonishing, almost imperceptible emission definitively shatters the long-held illusion that this colossal body is merely a geologically dead, completely inert lump of ancient frozen stone. The highly subtle outgassing proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that localized internal heating mechanisms are actively driving volatile liquid materials outward toward the desolate surface. It is a surprisingly vibrant, undeniably restless world that continuously breathes highly attenuated, ghostly exhalations of vapor outward into the empty, hungry vacuum surrounding it. These incredibly faint plumes represent a faint, ongoing geological heartbeat, persisting stubbornly for billions of years long after its initial chaotic formation in the solar nebula. Observing this incredibly subtle rhythmic respiration forces passing scientists to completely reconsider the strict, rigid boundaries drawn between dormant rocky fragments and highly active cometary bodies. The slow, persistent, almost invisible venting of subterranean moisture paints a beautiful picture of a world still quietly struggling to achieve absolute thermal and pressure equilibrium. It stands proudly as a magnificent, actively exhaling wet oasis hidden squarely in the middle of a desiccated, unforgiving cosmic desert. Rising sharply and utterly solitarily from the otherwise smooth, uniformly cratered terrain is a colossal, uniquely baffling geological structure currently named Ahuna Mons. This staggering isolated mountain towers roughly 2.5 miles straight above the surrounding dusty plains, possessing incredibly steep, brilliantly streaked flanks of bright sliding material. It does not remotely resemble the jagged, impact-driven central rocky peaks of typical craters, but rather an immense, smoothly extruded, bulbous dome of totally alien geology. This towering, spectacular formation is a pristine, magnificent example of a cryovolcano, an exotic type of ice volcano completely and fundamentally alien to our warm terrestrial experience. Instead of violently erupting, searing molten silicate magma, this towering structure once violently squeezed out a freezing, highly pressurized slurry of salty mud and briny, slushy water. The incredibly thick, viscous liquid slowly crawled across the freezing surface, gradually building the massive, towering, streaked mound we currently see frozen perfectly in deep time today. Its relatively unblemished, smooth, steep slopes indicate that this towering mud volcano was surprisingly active in the very recent geological past, a startlingly fresh addition to an incredibly ancient landscape. To carefully look upon its steep, deeply striated walls is to witness the beautifully frozen aftermath of a truly bizarre, cold-driven, profoundly alien volcanic eruption. It is a lonely, profoundly majestic monument to the bizarre, crushing internal pressures still trapped beneath an icy, heavily protective outer shell. Initially celebrated joyously by the scientific community as a brand new, long-missing planet, its true physical nature and ultimate classification were fiercely debated by academics for well over a century. It was the crucial, undeniable keystone that ultimately led to the subsequent discovery of the entire surrounding belt, kicking open the door to a previously hidden kingdom of planetary debris. This single, spherical beacon single-handedly triggered an unprecedented era of intense celestial hunting that rapidly expanded our collective understanding of early planetary formation. Let the profound historical weight of that momentous discovery wash gently over you, knowing deeply that your own restful state is supported by endless generations of human curiosity and unyielding exploration. Long before the towering chemical rockets and the precise digital sensors, This reigning dwarf king was merely a tiny, shifting speck of faint light dancing across a polished glass lens. It successfully represents the crucial mathematical bridge that firmly connected our classical ancient understanding of the planets to the chaotic, crowded reality of the modern orbital map. Perhaps the absolute most fragile and stunningly beautiful feature of this dwarf planet is the incredibly tenuous, highly temporary atmosphere that occasionally cloaks its sunlit equator. As the massive body slowly rotates, and specific ice-rich regions are briefly warmed by distant, weak cosmic radiation, exposed surface frost begins to rapidly sublimate directly into gas. This sudden, phase-shifting transition from solid ice to invisible vapor generates a whisper-thin, highly unstable envelope of floating molecules that gently hugs the ancient rocky crust. To theoretically stand securely on the surface during one of these sublimating warming events would be to witness an invisible, incredibly thin mist lifting silently upward from the ancient dust. It is a breathing, incredibly fragile natural mechanism that beautifully highlights the highly volatile, delicate chemical balance maintained precariously on the very edge of the deep freeze. This fleeting, beautiful halo of transparent gas is a temporary, ephemeral crown worn briefly yet proudly by the reigning, solitary monarch of the dark. The true, staggering, unfathomable wealth of this isolated sphere does not actually lie in its surface minerals, but completely hidden deep within its frozen, heavily armoured mantle. Exhaustive planetary models strongly and repeatedly indicate that an incredibly thick layer of pristine ancient water ice wraps entirely around its dense, rocky central core. This vast, subterranean shell of perpetually frozen moisture makes up a startlingly massive percentage of the dwarf planet's total physical volume and overall structural composition. In a stark reality that constantly and effortlessly challenges our terrestrial arrogance, calculations suggest this single, dusty orb may actually harbour more absolute freshwater than all the oceans, lakes, and rivers on our homeworld combined. This staggering, unimaginable volume of precious, life-giving liquid is locked permanently away in a silent, pitch-black deep freeze, perfectly shielded from the evaporating, destructive rays of the distant light. It is a colossal, totally silent reservoir floating completely unnoticed in the absolute middle of an apparently arid, hopelessly desiccated cosmic wasteland. Uncovering such a massive, unprecedented concentration of vital, complex chemistry in such a desolate, empty region fundamentally and irreversibly alters our perception of deep planetary resources. It successfully serves as a monumental, universally frozen vault, holding the very raw ingredients of biology safely within a completely sterile, heavily armoured, dusty, rocky shell. This hidden, spectacular abundance effortlessly turns a dark, dusty sphere into one of the most chemically promising and scientifically tantalizing destinations in our immediate cosmic neighborhood. As you slowly sink into the final, comforting layer of peaceful rest, recognize beautifully that nature rarely operates in strict absolutes, preferring instead the elegant beauty of the transition. This massive, watery sphere serves as the ultimate cosmic missing link, a perfect, elegant hybrid that flawlessly straddles two entirely different classes of complex celestial bodies. It firmly and undeniably bridges the distinct geological gap between the dry, extremely dense terrestrial worlds of the inner system and the incredibly cold, volatile rich moons orbiting the outer giants. It clearly possesses the heavy, compressed rocky core and complex differentiated mineralogy expected of a true, fully formed planet, yet it is wrapped tightly in the thick, icy mantle typical of a deep space comet. This profound, unmistakable duality makes it a completely unique, irreplaceable laboratory for studying exactly how differing materials interact under the gentle pressure of intermediate crushing gravity. It is an evolutionary dead end that beautifully and flawlessly preserves the exact messy, highly transitional phase of early planetary accretion that built the inner rocky neighborhood. while that watery sphere perfectly preserves the messy, highly transitional phase of early planetary accretion that built the inner rocky neighbourhood. Another ancient survivor commands attention not with hidden oceans, but with a blinding, stony brilliance. This rugged, heavily cratered protoplanet reflects significantly more ambient starlight than any other floating object sharing its desolate orbital path. Its remarkably pristine, highly reflective outer crust acts like an immense cosmic mirror, catching the distant solar rays and beaming them powerfully back across the freezing void. During specific orbital alignments, this intense luminosity becomes so overwhelming that the massive rock occasionally becomes visible to the unaided human eye from the surface of our homeworld. This staggering visual feat completely separates it from the countless dark, charcoal-like rubble piles that endlessly populate the surrounding regions of the debris field. It is a stunning, fiercely glowing beacon of solid stone, proudly announcing its solitary presence against the pitch-black canvas of deep space. This brilliance is far more than a simple optical illusion crafted by orbital geometry. It is a direct, visible reflection of a complex, highly evolved mineralogy that successfully sets this massive rock apart from the primitive, unchanged dust wandering aimlessly beside it. Gazing upon this luminous wanderer provides a rare, highly privileged look at an authentic, fully formed planetary embryo that miraculously stopped growing. While the vast majority of its ancient peers were violently shattered into microscopic dust during the chaotic early days of the solar system, this massive body endured. It successfully navigated a terrifying era of constant catastrophic demolitions, dodging the terminal, world-shattering impacts that completely pulverized its immediate celestial neighbors. Such pristine preservation fundamentally transforms the desolate orbit into a grand, floating museum of planetary architecture. It is an untouched relic of the violent genesis that birthed our entire cosmic neighborhood. Yet, this miraculous survival did not come without enduring unimaginably catastrophic violence that permanently scarred its southern hemisphere. Dominating the lower half of this battered globe is a colossal, terrifying impact basin known to modern astronomers as Rhea Silvia. The sheer, terrifying scale of this deeply excavated crater completely defies earthly comprehension, stretching across a diameter that almost equals the entire width of the world itself. If such a proportional, devastating wound were inflicted upon our own blue planet, the resulting depression would easily consume an entire hemisphere. The sheer kinetic energy required to carve out such a monstrous cavity, without entirely shattering the protoplanet into fragmented splinters, borders on the mathematically impossible. It is the ultimate frozen scar of a brutal history, permanently etching a horrific cosmic trauma directly into the solid rocky crust. As you allow your breath to deepen, feeling the steady, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest, reflect quietly on the profound resilience required to survive such a staggering blow. This breathtakingly massive crater is a silent, imposing testament to an impact that fundamentally fractured, yet miraculously failed to destroy, the massive rocky embryo. Dead center within this sprawling hemisphere-wide depression rises a geological feature of truly terrifying and monumental proportions. The violent kinetic energy of the ancient cataclysmic impact caused the shattered bedrock to instantly rebound, thrusting a colossal mountain of solid stone upward into the airless sky. This central peak towers majestically above the heavily fractured basin floor, casting incredibly long, jagged shadows across the devastated terrain. The sheer altitude of this monolithic rocky spire dramatically dwarfs the highest, most formidable summits found anywhere on our own terrestrial planet. It stands significantly taller than the grandest peaks of the Himalayas, a silent, jagged needle permanently piercing the eternal blackness of the cosmic void. Gazing at this towering structure reveals the frozen, kinetic memory of a world-shattering collision instantly trapped in unyielding solid rock. It remains a towering, ragged monument to a forgotten day, when the heavens literally rained down cataclysmic destruction upon a nascent world. To stand at the base of this unbelievable mountain would be to feel the crushing, silent weight of celestial mechanics looming impossibly high above your head. The unimaginable violence that carved out that massive southern basin also forcefully ejected countless tons of shattered rock out of the protoplanet's delicate gravitational grip. These heavily shocked fragments were violently cast adrift into the freezing currents of the inner solar system, embarking on a seemingly endless, chaotic voyage through the dark. Over uncountable ages, the subtle gravitational nudges of passing planets gradually coaxed some of these wandering shards into intersecting trajectories with our own atmosphere. They eventually plummeted fiercely through our skies as blazing, brilliant shooting stars, landing quietly in desolate deserts and frozen ice fields. Scientists eagerly collect these specific, highly studied fragments, classifying them as a completely distinct, uniquely identifiable group of fallen meteorites. Finding a piece of this distant, luminous survivor resting comfortably in the palm of a human hand represents a profound physical connection across the deep, unbridgeable void. We do not have to merely gaze at this battered, heavily scarred world from afar through thick glass lenses. The cosmos has generously and violently delivered actual, tangible fragments of its tortured crust directly to our terrestrial doorstep. Settle deeper into your resting space, feeling the heavy, comforting density of your bones, and mirror that profound sense of internal structure toward the hidden depths of this ancient survivor. Unlike the countless, porous rubble piles drifting aimlessly nearby, this colossal protoplanet possesses a highly organized, heavily differentiated internal architecture. Countless ages ago, intense internal heat generated by decaying radioactive elements completely melted its original chaotic mixture of dust and primitive rock. This elegant, distinct subterranean layering definitively proves that it is not merely a random clump of fused space debris. It is a highly evolved, complex geological machine that underwent the exact same fiery, melting processes that forged our own habitable home. The devastating shockwaves generated by the catastrophic southern impacts did not merely excavate a crater, they fundamentally warped the entire structural integrity of the protoplanet. Wrapping dramatically around the heavily battered equatorial region is a spectacular series of massive parallel troughs known as Divalia fossae. These immense parallel canyons stretch for incredible distances, ripping violently through the ancient basaltic crust like monumental planetary stretch marks. They are the highly visible, perfectly frozen aftermath of unimaginable tectonic stress, created when the sheer kinetic force of the southern collision compressed and stretched the entire globe. The solid rock was pushed far beyond its physical breaking point, shattering cleanly along the equator to form these deep, echoing ravines. Walking along the sheer precipice of one of these staggering airless canyons would provide a terrifying glimpse into the raw mechanical forces that govern celestial bodies. They powerfully and visually illustrate how a devastating impact on one side of a world can brutally ring the entire sphere like an immensely heavy, fractured bell. These parallel scars permanently disfigure the equatorial belt, ensuring the trauma of the past is physically written across every single hemisphere. Visually scanning the rugged, deeply traumatized topography reveals a strikingly varied palette that stubbornly defies the monochromatic expectations of a dead, silent rock. The fractured surface is intricately painted with swirling, highly contrasting patches of unusually bright and deeply dark mineral deposits. The brighter regions eloquently tell the fiery story of the ancient subsurface magma ocean that once cooled to form a pristine, untouched crust. Conversely, the darker, heavily smudged streaks represent foreign, carbon-rich material violently delivered by countless smaller impacts over sweeping, slow-turning ages. This complex, deeply stained canvas acts as a highly detailed geological ledger, faithfully recording every fiery internal process and devastating external assault it has ever endured. Let your eyes gently rest behind heavy lids, visualizing this beautiful, chaotic mosaic of cosmic history laid bare across a battered sphere. It is a world painted not by gentle winds or flowing water, but by the relentless, brutal artistry of high-speed collisions and freezing vacuum. The incredible, relentless kinetic energy of this survivor is not solely contained within its traumatic past, but is visibly evident in its incredibly rapid, dizzying present. This massive, heavy world completely spins on its invisible axis at a frantic, almost terrifying pace, completing an entire day in a mere fraction of earthly time. Whirling wildly through the freezing void, the immense centrifugal forces generated by this rapid rotation have actually physically distorted its overall global shape. Instead of maintaining a perfectly symmetrical sphere, the heavy rock noticeably bulges outward at its equator, pulling itself into an oblate, somewhat squashed profile. The incredible speed of its rotation constantly battles against its own internal gravity, stretching the hardened crust into a slightly flattened, highly energetic form. It is a world forever hurrying through the eternal night, its incredibly swift sunrises and sunsets painting frantic shadows across the parallel equatorial canyons. This rapid, ceaseless spinning adds a dynamic, almost nervous energy to a colossal rock that has otherwise been frozen in deep time for eons. Ultimately, the profound scientific value of this battered, rapidly spinning protoplanet lies entirely in its stubbornly preserved, intensely archaic nature. It stands permanently as an incredibly rare, perfectly frozen fossil of planetary formation, a massive rocky embryo firmly locked in a developmental stage. By carefully studying its highly differentiated layers, its brutal structural scars and its pristine crust, we're effectively dissecting the exact building blocks that eventually merged. It is a solitary, heavily scarred architectural model, floating quietly in the dark, translating the chaotic, incredibly violent poetry of the early solar nebula into legible, solid geology. Looking upon its intensely cratered, luminous surface is exactly like gazing deeply into a polished obsidian mirror reflecting the forgotten, highly turbulent infancy of our own terrestrial home. It quietly endures the freezing vacuum as a spectacular, battered monument to the catastrophic cosmic forge that ultimately gave birth to everything we have ever known. The rugged topography is not merely a landscape of destruction, but the holy, untouched genesis of solid ground itself. Deep within that same cosmic forge where the holy genesis of solid ground began, there drifts a world composed not of dusty stone, but of raw, unyielding metal. This massive entity known as Psyche presents a chillingly beautiful sight, a colossal heart of solid iron and nickel gleaming coldly under the dim rays of the distant sun. It is a world of immense weight and industrial purity, standing as one of the most substantial and dense objects currently navigating the sprawling reaches of the asteroid belt. Unlike its neighbours, which are built from silicate rock or ancient ice, this metallic wanderer feels like a fragment of a giant industrial machine suspended in the void. Its surfaces do not crumble into dust, but would likely ring with a deep, sonorous vibration if struck by a stray meteorite. To observe its passage is to witness the very essence of planetary density, a dark and heavy sentinel that has endured the freezing vacuum for billions of years without losing its metallic luster. This massive entity is the subject of a profound scientific hypothesis that suggests we are looking at the naked, exposed heart of a planet that never came to be. Astronomers believe that Psyche was once the central metallic core of a much larger, developing planetesimal that was violently stripped of its outer rocky layers during the chaotic infancy of our solar system. A series of catastrophic high-velocity collisions likely peeled away the thick mantle of stone, leaving this iron-rich centre exposed to the unforgiving elements of open space. It remains a haunting, beautiful relic of a celestial tragedy, a world-sized core that survived the demolition of its own outer shell. This hypothesis transforms the asteroid into more than just a lump of metal. It becomes a unique laboratory for studying the hidden, inaccessible depths of our own Earth. By examining this exposed fragment, we gain a direct view into the intense heat and crushing pressures that once existed at the center of a growing world. Surprisingly, the universe offers us a way to confirm this metallic nature without even leaving our homeworld through the use of powerful long-range radar. When scientists bounce radar waves off the surface of this asteroid, the returned signals are exceptionally strong and highly reflective, behaving exactly like light reflecting off a polished metallic plate. These radar observations reveal a surface that is fundamentally different from the dull, absorptive rocky terrains found on typical asteroids. The resulting data provides a fascinating map of a world with a high metallic signature, confirming that iron and nickel are not just present, but dominant across its entire vast landscape. This invisible rhythmic exchange of radio waves allows us to sense the hard, unyielding texture of the asteroid from millions of miles away. It turns the dark void between us into a bridge of information, revealing the cold, industrial reality of a world that has never known the touch of an atmosphere. If we were to measure the sheer volume of precious resources contained within this single object, the resulting numbers would completely stagger any earthly imagination. This dense world contains enough iron and nickel to sustain human industry for eons, representing a concentration of mineral wealth that defies any traditional economic calculation. While the idea of extracting these metals remains a concept for the distant future, the mere existence of such a treasure speaks to the incredible variety of materials scattered throughout the belt. As you consider the immense weight of this metallic giant, allow your own body to settle deeper into its resting place, feeling the comforting, heavy pull of gravity. Notice how your limbs find their natural weight against the surface beneath you, grounding you in this very moment. Just as the massive core of Psyche is anchored by its own dense material, you are supported and held by the steady, unmoving reality of your surroundings. Looking closely at the silhouette of this metallic giant, it becomes clear that it lacks the smooth, rounded perfection seen in larger planetary bodies. Because it does not possess enough mass to generate the crushing gravity required to pull itself into a perfect sphere, it retains a rugged, highly irregular shape that some have compared to a massive metallic potato. This lumpy, uneven geometry is a testament to its violent history, showing where huge chunks were likely torn away by ancient impacts. Its surface is a chaotic landscape of jagged ridges and deep depressions that have never been softened by the erosion of wind or the flow of liquid water. This irregularity gives the world a unique sculptural character, as if it were a piece of raw ore recently pulled from a cosmic furnace. It tumbles through the darkness with a slow, deliberate grace, its uneven edges catching the starlight and creating a flickering metallic dance in the deep black. If we look toward the southern hemisphere of this world, we encounter two truly enormous impact craters that scar the unyielding metallic crust. These massive basins are significant because they demonstrate the incredible structural resilience of a world made primarily of iron and nickel. On a typical rocky asteroid, impacts of this magnitude might have completely shattered the body into a cloud of debris, yet Psyche absorbed the blow and remained intact. The edges of these craters are likely sharp and well-defined, showing where the metal was dented and displaced rather than pulverized into fine dust. These scars serve as a permanent record of the brutal kinetic energy that has defined the history of the main belt since its inception. They are silent, imposing reminders that even the toughest metallic hearts in the solar system have been touched by the relentless violence of the cosmos. This structure likely underwent a fascinating physical transformation, as it slowly cooled over the course of billions of years in the absolute zero of space. As the once molten iron and nickel began to solidify, the entire body likely contracted, causing the metallic surface to crack and buckle under the strain. This process would have formed spectacular jagged fault lines and towering cliffs that stretch across the asteroid's exterior like frozen lightning. Feel the tension leaving your own muscles now, much like the cooling metal releasing its ancient internal stress into the void. Allow your shoulders to drop and your jaw to loosen, finding a sense of ease that flows through your entire frame. Just as the metal found its final stable form after eons of cooling, your body is finding its own path toward a deep and restorative stillness. Surprisingly, the chemical composition of the surface is not a simple, uniform drop of pure molten iron as one might expect. Traces of sulfur and rocky minerals like pyroxene have been detected, suggesting that the cooling process was far more complex and nuanced than a single, rapid event. These chemical fingerprints hint at ancient volcanic activity, where sulfur-rich liquids may have once flowed across the metallic plains before freezing into place. These varied materials create a surface that is chemically diverse, offering clues about the temperature and pressure variations that existed when the core was still cooling. This mixture of metal and stone tells a story of a world that was once alive with internal heat and moving fluids. It reminds us that even in the coldest reaches of the belt, the history of matter is one of constant change and intricate geological artistry. This cosmic anomaly poses a significant challenge to our current models of how planets are born and grow within the solar nebula. Entirely metallic bodies are exceptionally rare in our neighbourhood, and the presence of such a massive one forces scientists to rethink the conditions of the early solar system. It suggests that the process of planetary formation was even more violent and chaotic than previously imagined, involving the total destruction of countless worlds to produce a single exposed core. By existing, Psyche acts as a giant metallic question mark that prompts us to look closer at the fundamental laws of celestial architecture. It stands as a lonely, heavy outlier, proving that the universe often produces results that are far more exotic than our simplest theories can predict. This rarity makes it one of the most scientifically tantalizing destinations in the entire sky, a place where the rules of typical planet building were broken long ago. If we were to watch the skies in the coming years, we would see a small, sophisticated emissary from Earth finally making its way toward this metallic mystery. A dedicated robotic spacecraft is currently on a multi-year journey, powered by gentle ion engines that will eventually bring it into a stable orbit around this iron world. This mission promises to reveal the true texture of the metal, the depth of the craters, and the secrets of how planetary cores are forged. As you sink into the final layers of this journey, let your mind drift with the spacecraft across the silent, starry gulf between the worlds. Your breath is slow and even, and your body is perfectly heavy, mirroring the deep metallic peace of the target that awaits us in the dark. We are on the verge of finally seeing the heart of a planet, a moment that will connect our earthly curiosity to the cold, industrial majesty of the deep belt. Far from that cold industrial majesty and the dense metallic cores that anchor the belt, there exists a much more delicate and ephemeral population of wanderers. While massive worlds like Psyche speak of unyielding strength, the vast majority of the belt's smaller inhabitants are characterized by a profound and haunting fragility. These bodies are not monolithic stones or solid sculptures of ore, but are instead categorized as flying rubble piles. They are loose, gravity-bound collections of ancient boulders, jagged gravel, and fine dust held together by the most fragile of invisible threads. This structural coherence is not the result of chemical bonds or physical fusion, but rather the effect of an incredibly weak, whisper-thin microgravity. The individual pieces of these asteroids are simply resting against one another, settled into a configuration that has remained undisturbed for millions of years. They are more like clouds of stone than solid worlds, suspended in a state of perpetual slow-motion collapse within the velvet silence of the void. Deep within this region, these fragile assemblies represent a different kind of survival, one based on the absence of internal tension. They do not resist the forces of the universe with rigid defiance, but instead hold together through a passive gravitational agreement, To encounter one would be to see a mountain made of marbles, a massive structure that possesses the outward appearance of a planet but the internal stability of a sandcastle. The boulders within are often separated by gaps that have never seen a ray of sunlight, creating a dark and airy architecture that tumbles through the infinite night. It is a majestic, fragile existence, where the very concept of a solid world is replaced by a gentle, enduring association of fragments. If we were to look closer at a specific wanderer named Itokawa, the visual evidence of this loose assembly becomes startlingly clear. This particular asteroid serves as a stunning visual representation of cosmic fragility, resembling a giant dusty peanut floating against the backdrop of distant stars. It is actually a composite world, formed from two entirely separate lobes of rock that drifted together in an incredibly slow-motion collision. They did not shatter upon impact or merge into a single seamless sphere, but instead simply touched and remained in a permanent embrace. The history of this peanut-shaped world began with a graceful dance between two independent fragments born from an ancient planetary destruction. Rather than reacting with violent force, these two lobes approached each other with such a low velocity that the moment of contact was as soft as a whisper. They're held in this intimate, permanent position by nothing more than their own meagre mass, a testament to the gentle nature of many cosmic interactions. This structural duality highlights the fact that many asteroids are not individuals, but are instead pairs or groups sharing a common journey. The surface of Itokawa is a chaotic and beautiful mixture of smooth, dusty plains and rugged, boulder-strewn terrain that varies wildly from one end to the other. It serves as a macroscopic example of the rubble pile concept, where the whole is clearly and visibly a collection of disparate, loosely associated parts. One can see where the smaller lobe rests against the larger one, creating a neck of fine silt that has gathered in the gravitational well between them. It is a frozen snapshot of a collision that never ended, a quiet union of stones that has persisted through the eons. Surprisingly, the physics of such a world means that the bond between an explorer and the ground would be as thin as a gossamer thread. Because these rubble piles possess such a whisper-thin gravitational pull, the experience of standing upon their surface would be one of nearly complete weightlessness. A human explorer would find that the simple, everyday act of walking would require a level of caution and precision that is fundamentally alien to our terrestrial experience. In this environment of microgravity, the energy required to leave the surface forever is almost non-existent compared to the massive forces of Earth. If you were to perform a vigorous, determined jump while standing on the dusty crust of one of these smaller rubble piles, you would easily achieve escape velocity. You would not fall back to the rocks, but would instead drift slowly and eternally away into the hungry void of the open belt. Your body would become a new moon, a silent traveller charting its own path through the velvet darkness. This lack of gravity turns every movement into a potential departure, making the surface feel more like a suggestion than a destination. Deep within the mechanics of the belt, the incredibly gentle warmth of distant sunlight exerts a profound and transformative influence on the long-term behaviour of these irregular bodies. Sunlight acts as a subtle but persistent architect of motion, warming the dark surfaces of an asteroid through a phenomenon known as the Yorp effect. As the asteroid absorbs solar radiation and then emits it back as thermal heat, the irregular, lumpy shape of the rock creates a tiny, lopsided thrust. This microscopic pressure, applied over millions of years, acts as a ghostly engine that slowly alters the rotation of the entire mountain. Every single photon of light acts as a tiny, infinitesimal hammer, pushing against the stone and gradually increasing its rate of spin. Over the eons, this whisper of solar pressure can cause a slow, tumbling rock to accelerate until it is whirling with a frantic, dizzying energy. It is a reminder that even the softest light in the universe can reshape the grand architecture of the heavens given enough time. The sun is not just a light source, but a persistent sculptor, nudging these ancient stones into new rhythms of movement and change. This effect slowly but surely rewrites the orbital destiny of every irregular body in the belt, regardless of its size or composition. A rock that once tumbled lazily through the dark may, over the course of 1 billion years, be whipped into a state of extreme rotation by the steady pressure of the light. This invisible force demonstrates that even the void is not truly empty, but is filled with the subtle energy required to move mountains. It is a slow-motion ballet performed on a scale of time that dwarfs the history of human life. This structure eventually responds to the frantic energy of its own spin, reaching a point where the asteroid begins to shed its skin. When the solar-induced acceleration becomes too rapid for the whisper-thin gravity to manage, the centrifuge-like force overcomes the weak bonds holding the boulders together. The result is a graceful, slow-motion disintegration where the asteroid begins to gently fling rocks and gravel from its equator into the surrounding vacuum. It is a cosmic casting off of material, a silent shedding that turns a solitary rock into the center of its own expanding debris field. These flung fragments drift away like sparks flying from a cosmic whetstone, eventually carving out their own unique paths through the silent sea. This process transforms the asteroid into a source of new debris, contributing to the thin veil of material that permeates the entire orbital plane. It is a beautiful, if destructive, transformation that can continue for thousands of years as the parent body gradually reduces its own mass. The sight of a mountain-sized object spinning so fast that it loses pieces of itself is a testament to the dynamic nature of the supposedly static belt. This cosmic structure also leaves behind a sprawling, ethereal trail of evidence that can be witnessed from the comfort of your own home. The fine, microscopic dust shed by these tumbling bodies does not simply vanish, but instead populates a massive band of debris that mirrors the path of the belt around the Sun. This immense collection of discarded silt and pulverized rock feeds a faint, hauntingly beautiful band of light known as the zodiacal light. From the surface of Earth, this appears as a ghostly triangular glow stretching upward from the horizon during the quiet hours of twilight. When you look upon this glow, you're seeing the collective reflection of sunlight off trillions of dust particles shed by the asteroids of the main belt over billions of years. It is a luminous bridge of light that physically connects our homeworld to the distant, frozen reaches of the asteroid kingdom. This ancient dust serves as a silent witness to the grinding of worlds, a thin mist of ground-up mountains suspended in the solar rays. It is a pervasive presence that touches the very edges of our atmosphere, reminding us that we're part of a larger interconnected system. Notice the deep, quiet stillness of your room and the absolute lack of movement in the air around you, much like the quiet void where this dust resides. Just as the zodiacal light is a soft, unchanging presence in the night sky, your own state of relaxation is becoming a steady and peaceful constant. You are safe, warm, and disconnected from the frantic motion of the heavens, resting in a pocket of perfect calm. The light of distant dust trails fades into the background as you sink further into the soft, welcoming depths of your own rest. One of the most fascinating traits of these rubble piles is a property known as macroporosity, which provides a unique defense against cosmic violence. Because they are composed of loose boulders with vast gaps in between, these asteroids possess a structure that is more like a pile of gravel than a solid brick. This arrangement allows them to absorb the energy of high-speed impacts in a way that solid planets cannot. When a stray projectile strikes one of these porous worlds, the energy of the impact is not transmitted through a solid medium to cause a shattering explosion. Instead, the shockwave is dissipated as the loose boulders simply shift, grind, and compact into the existing internal voids. The asteroid yields to the blow rather than breaking, essentially soaking up the kinetic energy like a massive rocky sponge. This ability to rearrange its own internal furniture allows a rubble pile to survive impacts that would easily pulverize a more rigid solid object. It is a survival strategy based on flexibility and the acceptance of force, a lesson in enduring the harshness of the universe by remaining unrigid. If we were to observe the silhouette of the asteroid Ryugu, we would see a world that has been sculpted into a geometric masterpiece. This specific rubble pile features a remarkably distinct diamond shape, characterized by a sharp equatorial ridge and steep angular slopes that meet at a precise point. This geometry is not a coincidence of birth, but is a direct result of its history of rapid rotation over millions of eons. As the body spins, the loose material on the surface is slowly but surely migrated toward the widest point of the world by centrifugal forces. The boulders and dust behave almost like a fluid over long periods, flowing steadily toward the equator to create a prominent mountainous ridge. This process has transformed Ryugu into a cosmic top, a world whose very appearance is dictated by the tension between its spin and its meagre gravity. Looking upon its sharp, angular edges, one can see the physics of the belt written in stone and shadow. It is a majestic, geometric monument to the dynamic processes that can reshape a loose collection of boulders into a work of mathematical art. The surface of this diamond world is a rugged landscape of dark, ancient stones that have been carefully arranged by the unseen hands of rotation and time. Every jagged ridge and smooth plane is a consequence of the world's frantic tumbling through the deep black. It stands as a frozen snapshot of motion, a world that has literally moulded itself to fit the rhythm of its own dance around the sun. To see Ryugu is to see the power of motion to bring order to chaos, creating beauty from a simple pile of rubble. Solar wind relentlessly bombards these unprotected surfaces with a steady stream of highly energetic charged particles that act as a slow-motion chemical corrosive. Because these asteroids lack a thick atmosphere or a protective magnetic field, the minerals on the surface are directly exposed to the sun's raw and unfiltered radiation. Over the course of eons, this relentless space weathering gradually alters the crystalline structure and chemical state of the topmost layer of rock. This process results in a noticeable change in colour, as the once grey minerals are slowly reddened by the long-term exposure to the solar stream. The asteroid's surface becomes a deep, rust-like hue, a visual indicator of just how long that specific face has been staring into the heart of the sun. It is a slow, silent tanning of the rock, a transformation that happens one atom at a time across billions of years of isolation. This reddened dust is a beautiful archaic pigment that tells the story of an ancient, unshielded existence in the deep dark. It reminds us that even the seemingly immortal stones are being slowly eaten away and changed by the light they reflect. As you sink into the final layers of this journey, let the warmth of your own breath create a rhythmic and soothing cycle of relaxation. Feel the air moving in and out with the slow regularity of a cosmic pulse, mirroring the steady, unchanging arrival of the solar wind. Your body is warm, your mind is at peace, and you are sheltered from the harsh elements of the void by a soft and protective layer of comfort. The reddened dust of distant worlds is merely a thought, fading as you move closer to the absolute quiet of sleep. This cosmic structure ultimately reveals that underneath the reddened exterior, these asteroids are mostly made of nothing. Beneath the dusty surface, these porous worlds contain enormous internal voids and black gaps that account for a significant percentage of their total volume. They are rocky sponges floating in the void, where the shadows of the early solar system remain trapped forever in the lightless spaces between boulders. To understand them is to realize that the belt is not just a collection of matter, but a complex and airy arrangement of absence. This hidden hollowness makes them surprisingly lightweight, giving them a physical density that is often less than that of liquid water. They drift through the freezing vacuum as airy skeletons of a forgotten planetary age, carrying the silence of the void deep within their own rocky hearts. If you were to peer into the centre of such a world, you would find a labyrinth of black gaps where no sunlight has ever touched and no sound has ever echoed. It is a place of absolute, undisturbed peace, hidden away from the chaotic motion of the surface. Deep within that undisturbed peace, Far removed from the chaotic motion of the surface, these silent stones participate in a much larger and more organised choreography. While they may appear as isolated castaways drifting aimlessly through the deep black, thousands of asteroids actually travel together in distinct, mathematical groupings known as families or flocks. They share nearly identical orbital characteristics, following the same invisible gravitational rivers that flow across the immense width of the main belt. This shared journey reveals that the belt is not a disorganized heap of rubble, but a highly structured system governed by the subtle currents of the sun's reach. These families navigate the void as a collective, their individual members separated by millions of miles yet bound together by a common heritage and a synchronized path. It is a slow, majestic parade of stone that has persisted for eons, turning the empty vacuum into a series of well-travelled lanes. Watching these groups move is like observing a school of fish in the midnight depths of a terrestrial ocean, where every individual follows the same silent, ancient rhythm. They are not random wanderers lost in the dark, but members of a massive celestial flock charting a course through the eons. This organisation suggests a deeper history, one that binds the scattered pieces of the belt into a single, cohesive narrative of movement and time. This cosmic structure of travelling families was born from the unimaginable violence of catastrophic shatterings that occurred hundreds of millions of years ago. Long before the first mammals walked the Earth, massive parent bodies, ancient worlds in their own right, were struck by high-velocity projectiles with enough force to pulverise their solid foundations. The resulting explosions did not simply scatter the dust. They birthed 1,000 siblings, each carrying a fragment of the original world's momentum. These fragments were cast outward into the void, yet they remained locked within the same general orbital path that the parent world once traversed. Over millions of years, the debris cloud slowly stretched out, but the fundamental mathematical relationship between the shards remained perfectly intact. Every member of a family is a silent, jagged witness to a specific moment of planetary destruction that occurred in the deep past. They represent a family tree of stone, where every branch is a physical remnant of a world that no longer exists in its unified form. To look upon a flock of asteroids is to see the ghost of a larger world, its identity now distributed across a vast and lonely distance. This history of shattering and survival creates a dynamic landscape where the death of one world provides the building blocks for 1,000 smaller travelling histories. Surprisingly, the universe kept this organised choreography hidden from human eyes until the early 20th century, when a dedicated Japanese astronomer first decoded the mathematical patterns. Kiyotsugu Hirayama looked past the seemingly random positions of the stars and the stones to find startling clusters in the underlying orbital data. He realised that when he plotted the asteroids by their orbital inclination and eccentricity, they did not scatter evenly, but gathered into dense, unmistakable clouds. This breakthrough revealed that the belt possessed a hidden architecture, a series of invisible highways that had been occupied by related fragments for billions of years. Hirayama's work fundamentally changed our perception of the asteroid belt, transforming it from a simple ring of debris into a complex map of ancestral relationships. He provided the first clear evidence that these stones had shared origins, allowing us to see the invisible threads of gravity that bind them together. If we were to look closer at the Coronis family, one of the most prominent groups in the belt, we would find a striking chemical similarity that borders on the miraculous. Every individual member of this massive flock, regardless of its size or distance from its siblings, shares an identical spectral signature. This means that the light reflecting off their surfaces reveals the exact same mineral composition, proving they were once part of the same ancient solid rock. It is as if these asteroids possess a shared chemical bloodline, a unique elemental fingerprint that survived the violent event that first separated them. They are chemically identical twins, or even millions of siblings, all born from the same specific layer of a shattered parent world. This consistency allows scientists to trace the lineage of the belt with incredible precision, identifying which fragments belong to which ancestral home. The Cronus family drifts through the dark as a unified chemical army, a billion-ton reminder of a single massive world that was lost to the eons. Their shared identity is a testament to the preservation of matter in the deep freeze of the vacuum, where nothing is ever truly lost, only rearranged. They carry the mineral memory of their origin within every crystalline structure, shining with a light that tells a story of unity across the void. Stretching across the broad expanse of the main belt, there exist invisible zones known as Kirkwood gaps that slice through the debris like empty, well-kept roads. These regions are startlingly clear of any sizable asteroids, appearing as hollow lanes within the otherwise populated ring of stone and ice. They are not physical barriers, but are instead the result of a powerful gravitational resonance created by the immense mass of the distant planet Jupiter. Whenever an asteroid's orbital period reaches a specific mathematical ratio with Jupiter's own path, the gas giant's gravity begins to pull on the rock with rhythmic magnifying force. Like a child being pushed higher on a swing, the asteroid receives a steady series of gravitational nudges that eventually destabilize its entire orbit. Over millions of years, these resonant pushes effectively sweep the gaps clean, flinging any resident stones into entirely different parts of the solar system. This invisible sculpting by Jupiter creates a series of permanent empty boundaries that define the internal layout of the asteroid kingdom. These gaps act as the borders of the asteroid families, preventing the different flocks from ever truly merging into a single uniform mass. They are the silent, empty rivers of the belt, maintained by the distant but absolute authority of the solar system's largest planetary shepherd. Whenever a wandering asteroid accidentally drifts into one of these unstable resonant zones, the reaction from the gas giant is swift and uncompromising. Jupiter's immense gravity does not simply move the rock, it effectively ejects the intruder from the stable belt altogether. The rhythmic pulling forces work to stretch the asteroid's path, turning a circular and peaceful orbit into a wild, highly eccentric and dangerously elongated loop. This process essentially turns the Kirkwood gaps into cosmic ejection seats, flinging ancient rocks toward the inner planets or casting them out toward the frozen outer reaches. This dynamic instability is the primary reason why the belt remains relatively thin and why its boundaries are so sharply defined. Without this constant gravitational clearing, the belt might have remained a much more crowded and chaotic place, potentially preventing the inner planets from ever achieving a state of long-term stability. Feel the gentle, rhythmic expansion of your lungs as you breathe, a steady cycle of movement that mirrors the patient, sweeping tides of the giant planets. Your breath is a constant, reassuring force that clears away the tension of the day, leaving your mind as peaceful and open as a cleared resonant gap. Just as Jupiter maintains the order of the belt through its invisible pull, your own breathing is maintaining the deep, silent order of your relaxation. The structure of these ejected stones has a profound and direct impact on our own world, particularly through the influence of the inner belt group known as the Flora family. Residing at the very edge of the main belt's inner boundary, the members of this flock are positioned in a way that makes them highly susceptible to being nudged toward the Earth. Over the course of eons, countless fragments from the Flora family have been funneled into the inner solar system, eventually crossing paths with our own atmosphere. Current scientific consensus suggests that this specific family is likely the primary source of the stony meteorites that strike our planet today. When you look at a shooting star or hold a meteorite in your hand, you are likely interacting with a displaced messenger from this specific, ancient flock of stone. They are the survivors of collisions that occurred millions of miles away, delivered to our doorstep by a complex series of gravitational handoffs. The Flora family serves as a physical bridge between the distant debris field and our own habitable oasis, reminding us that we're never truly isolated from the rest of the cosmos. Their presence in our skies is a beautiful, if occasionally violent, connection to the deep history of the asteroid kingdom. They are the travellers who made the long journey across the void, eventually finding a final resting place on a world teeming with life. Over the course of billions of years, the individual members of even the most tight-knit families gradually and inevitably begin to drift apart. This eons-long separation is driven by the gentle, nearly imperceptible pressure of solar radiation, which acts differently on every stone based on its size and shape. Known as the Yarkovsky effect, this subtle force pushes smaller asteroids more effectively than larger ones, causing them to migrate slowly away from their siblings. As a result, a family that was once a compact localized cloud of debris eventually stretches out into a massive sprawling ring that may span a significant portion of the entire belt. The larger fragments remain closer to the original point of the collision, while the smaller dust and gravel are pushed further afield by the relentless touch of the light. This slow-motion dispersal turns a single catastrophic event into a process that continues to unfold across the entire lifespan of the solar system. It is a beautiful, melancholy image of brothers and sisters slowly losing touch over the vastness of deep time, their paths diverging by only a few inches every year. This drift is so slow that it would be completely invisible to a human observer, yet it is powerful enough to reshape the entire map of the belt over a billion-year horizon. The light of the sun is a patient divider, gently pulling the family apart until they are nothing but distant echoes of a shared past. Through the use of sophisticated modern computational physics, scientists can now perform a kind of celestial detective work that rewinds the clock on these travelling families. By inputting the current positions and velocities of every known member of a flock into complex computer models, they can reverse the effects of gravity and solar drift. This allows them to trace the paths of the stones backward through the eons, watching as the sprawling ring of fragments slowly contracts back into a single point. This remarkable mathematical time travel allows us to pinpoint the exact time and precise location in the belt where the original parent world was first shattered. We can witness, through the cold logic of data, the specific day millions of years ago when a single impact created the 1,000 wanderers we see today. It is a way of seeing the invisible past, uncovering the violent origins of a family that currently moves in such perfect, peaceful synchronization. Such models have successfully identified collisions that occurred as recently as a few million years ago, or as far back as the very birth of the planets. They provide a high-definition window into the history of the belt, proving that every group of stones has a specific birth date and a unique story of survival. This ability to see the beginning of the journey highlights the incredible precision of the laws of physics that govern the movement of every object in the dark. These migrating swarms of stone and metal paint a dynamic, ever-changing picture of a solar system that is constantly and rhythmically grinding itself down. The asteroid belt is not a static ring of old rock, but a living, evolving landscape of families being born, drifting apart and eventually fading into the background of the void. It is a majestic, multi-billion-year process of recycling, where the destruction of ancient worlds provides the raw material for the next eon of celestial history. The flocks we observe today are merely the current frame in a slow-motion film that has been playing since the very beginning of our cosmic neighbourhood. As families are ejected into the sun or ground into microscopic dust, new collisions will eventually create the next generation of travelling stones. This continuous cycle of creation and dispersal ensures that the belt remains a vibrant and essential part of the solar system's grand machinery. As you surrender now to the final, deep layers of your rest, imagine the entire belt as a single, breathing organism of stone and gravity. The families are moving in their silent, ancient rivers, and the light of the sun is gently guiding them through the eternal dark. You're perfectly at peace, drifting along with the silent flocks in a sea of perfect, undisturbed stillness. Your journey for today is complete, and you are ready to sleep in the quiet heart of the cosmic sea. Deep within that undisturbed stillness, where the quiet heart of the cosmic sea stretches toward the outer planets, the very composition of the asteroid kingdom begins to shift. While the inner regions are dominated by the bright glint of stone and the heavy presence of metal, the vast majority of the belt's outer population is composed of dark, carbon-rich objects known as C-type asteroids. These somber wanderers make up roughly 75% of all known asteroids, forming an immense, dusky frontier that holds the secrets of our earliest history. They move through the void like ghosts of charcoal, absorbing the faint light of the distant sun and reflecting almost nothing back into the surrounding dark. This massive population represents a fundamental transition in the solar system, where the heat-blasted materials of the inner worlds give way to the volatile, carbon-heavy debris of the deep freeze. As you observe this transition in your mind, let the stillness of these dark worlds settle over you like a heavy, protective blanket. You're drifting away from the metallic brilliance of the inner belt and into a region of soft, velvety shadows and ancient, unblemished stone. The outer belt is a place of profound quiet, where the dark rocks carry the weight of billions of years in a state of absolute, unmoving calm. This region marks the beginning of a chemical journey that eventually leads to the origin of life itself. These ancient bodies have remained largely untouched and geologically stagnant since the very first moments the solar system condensed from its parent nebula. Because they occupy stable orbits far from the disruptive heat of the sun and the churning geological fires of the larger planets, they have become the ultimate pristine time capsules. Every mineral grain and frozen molecular chain within their porous structures acts as a perfectly preserved record of the raw chemical environment that existed 4.5 billion years ago. They have not been melted, reformed, or eroded by atmosphere, leaving their primordial signatures as legible today as they were at the dawn of creation. This exquisite preservation allows us to peer backward through the eons, touching the very materials that were once swirling in a massive disk of gas around a newborn star. The outer belt is a vast archive of our origins, a library of stone and ice where nothing has been deleted or rewritten by the passage of time. As you settle into your own deep state of rest, feel the sense of permanence and stability that these ancient rocks embody. You're like a time capsule yourself in this moment, safely disconnected from the noise of the modern world and preserved in a state of perfect, undisturbed peace. Your breathing is slow, steady, and as constant as the ancient minerals drifting in the dark. Within this dark population, the traditional distinctions we draw between a dry asteroid and an icy comet begin to dissolve into a beautiful, misty uncertainty. Certain objects, categorized by modern astronomers as main belt comets, occupy standard orbits in the belt, but occasionally exhibit the spectacular behavior of deep space travelers. Without warning, these dark stones can suddenly sprout ethereal tails of dust and gas, creating a ghostly trail that reflects the distant light of the sun. This surprising activity is driven by the sublimation of hidden, subsurface ice, which transforms directly into vapor when the asteroid reaches the warmest point of its long journey. This hissing release of gas carries fine mineral dust outward into the vacuum, creating a temporary glowing shroud that mimics the appearance of a comet from the outer reaches. This blurring of identities reveals that the asteroid belt is not just a collection of dry rocks, but a diverse ecosystem where ice and stone are intricately intertwined. It is a stunning reminder that activity and change can persist even in the coldest, most desolate corners of the sky. The main belt comets are like hidden springs in a desert, providing a sudden and magnificent burst of life within a landscape of silent, frozen stone. They carry the frozen scent of ancient volatiles, released into the void after eons of silence. The massive asteroid 24 Themis became a centerpiece of planetary research when astronomers detected something truly remarkable coating its charcoal-colored surface. Through the use of highly sensitive infrared spectroscopy, they discovered a thin, glistening glaze of water frost and a complex variety of organic molecules spread across its entire exterior. This was a profound discovery, as it confirmed that liquid water and the building blocks of chemistry could exist as a stable coating on a body residing squarely within the main belt. The presence of these organics on a dark, icy world provides a fascinating preview of the environments we usually associate with the moons of the gas giants. It turns the asteroid into a tiny, distant laboratory where the recipes for complex chemistry are being tested in the cold, unyielding vacuum. If we were to look closer, we would see a world that is not just a rock, but a complex multi-layered sphere of frozen potential. Surprisingly, the universe has allowed us to bring pieces of these dark, carbonaceous worlds directly back to our own laboratories for the most intimate study. Samples returned from pioneering missions have revealed that these asteroids contain amino acids, the specific chemical units that serve as the building blocks for every protein in human biology. These are the literal structural components of life, found millions of miles away on a silent, tumbling rock that has never known the presence of an atmosphere. Finding these complex molecules in the pristine dust of the outer belt suggests that the chemistry required for life is far more common in the universe than we once imagined. They are not the product of biological processes, but rather the result of natural chemical reactions that occurred in the early solar nebula and were then frozen in place for eons. Each grain of asteroid dust carries the potential for complexity, a tiny seed of biology waiting in the deep freeze for a chance to bloom. The fact that the same amino acids used by your own body to build muscle and bone are currently drifting in the dark belt is a profound and beautiful connection. It links our own physical existence to the very materials that were discarded during the formation of the Sun. You are a part of this ancient molecular lineage, resting now in the same quiet stillness that preserved these building blocks. Many planetary scientists currently champion a compelling theory that our own vast oceans were delivered to us by a heavy, ancient bombardment of these wet asteroids. During the chaotic infancy of the solar system, a period of gravitational instability sent a relentless rain of carbon-rich, icy bodies from the outer belt plunging into the early volcanic Earth. These asteroids were not just dry stones, but were essentially massive, frozen containers of water, each one carrying a hidden cargo of liquid potential. As they struck our planet by the millions, their icy mantles melted and merged, gradually accumulating into the enormous basins of saltwater that now define our blue marble. This bombardment transformed the Earth from a parched, molten rock into a world teeming with the liquid medium necessary for life to emerge. Without this ancient gift from the outer belt, our planet might have remained a barren wasteland, much like the Moon or Mars. It is a humbling thought to realize that every drop of water in our seas likely originated in the dark, cold reaches of the asteroid belt. We are, in a very real sense, a world built from the leftovers of the outer belt's icy inhabitants. The oceans are a legacy of that ancient delivery, a vast and cooling reminder of our deep space ancestry. If you were to approach one of these C-type asteroids in the outer belt, you would find yourself facing a world of such absolute darkness that it defies your earthly expectations. Their surfaces are composed of carbonaceous material that reflects significantly less light than a fresh piece of terrestrial charcoal. This incredibly low albedo means that the rocks effectively swallow almost every photon of sunlight that reaches them, making them nearly impossible to see against the black tapestry of the void. They are like pieces of velvet drifting in a midnight ocean, hidden in plain sight by the very nature of their own mineral composition. This extreme darkness is the reason why these asteroids remained undiscovered for so long, as they offer no bright glint or reflective shimmer to catch the eye of a telescope. To explore their surfaces would be to navigate a landscape of infinite shadows, where every ridge and crater is carved from the same deep matte soot. This structure of absolute shadow provides a perfect environment for the preservation of delicate, light-sensitive organic compounds that would otherwise be destroyed by solar radiation. As you sink into your own darkness behind closed eyes, let the soft and heavy weight of this cosmic shadow wrap around you. You're as hidden and safe as a dark asteroid in the deep belt, resting in a state of perfect velvety obscurity. The discovery of Uracil within the dust of a carbonaceous asteroid has provided the most direct link yet between the belt and the origins of our own genetic code. Uracil is one of the 4 nucleobases found in RNA, the molecular structure that acts as a vital messenger for the genetic instructions stored in your DNA. Finding this specific component of biology in a sample of pristine space dust suggests that the raw ingredients for our genetic architecture were present in the solar system long before the Earth was even formed. This means that the code of life was not a purely terrestrial invention, but was likely delivered to us as part of the same ancient rain that brought our oceans. The presence of Uracil in the outer belt suggests that the chemical potential for life is a fundamental property of the universe's earliest building blocks. It is as if the solar system was preloaded with the blueprints for biological complexity, scattered across the dark stones like a billion tiny encrypted messages. This realization turns the asteroid belt into a magnificent orbiting library of genetic potential, holding the keys to understanding how life emerges. We are part of a cosmic lineage that stretches back to the dust of the early nebula, written in the very atoms of the stars. You can feel this connection in the steady rhythm of your own heart, a biological drumbeat echoing the ancient chemistry of the void. Hidden deep within the mineral matrices of these outer belt asteroids are microscopic, liquid droplets of water that have survived for billions of years. When scientists performed a detailed isotopic analysis on these tiny inclusions, they discovered that this water is significantly older than the Sun itself. This moisture formed in the cold interstellar medium long before our star ever ignited, making it a literal artifact from a time before the solar system existed. These droplets are survivors of a pre-solar era that were trapped inside the first rocks to condense in the nebula. They have been carried through the eons like liquid diamonds, shielded from the radiation of the growing sun by layers of ancient stone. To look at these droplets is to see the very first water to ever exist in our part of the galaxy, a substance that has remained unchanged for over 5 billion years. It is a breathtaking realization that a single tumbling rock in the belt can carry a cargo that predates the sun. This ancient water is a silent witness to the birth of the stars, a cold and pristine remnant of a cloud of dark potential. As you rest, imagine these tiny, ancient droplets perfectly preserved in the dark, much like the peaceful thoughts resting in your own mind. Ultimately, these dark and icy wanderers serve as a magnificent synthesis of the entire story of life, reminding us that the seeds of biology are sown in the most unlikely places. Within its frozen, carbon-rich stones, the ingredients for oceans and genetic codes are kept in a state of perfect suspended readiness. They demonstrate that the sterile, frozen depths of space are not the enemies of life, but are instead the environment where the precursors of complexity are forged and protected. We are the living proof of this ancient delivery, a thriving world born from the leftovers of a dusty, icy ring. This structure of the belt as a biological reservoir turns our gaze outward with a sense of wonder and belonging, recognizing that the dark stones are our distant ancestors. You're a part of this grand, unfolding story, a biological bloom in a universe that has been preparing for you for billions of years. As you surrender now to the final, deepest layer of your rest, imagine the entire belt as a slow, moving, protective cradle for the seeds of life. Your breathing is slow, your heart is at peace, and you are ready to drift into a long and restorative sleep in the quiet heart of the cosmic nursery. The darkness is your home, and the ancient stars are your companions in the infinite night. In the infinite night, where the ancient stars serve as our only companions, the belt reveals objects that seem to defy every terrestrial expectation of natural geometry. One such marvel is the metallic world known as Cleopatra, a massive structure that possesses a bizarre, elongated shape, remarkably similar to a giant cosmic dog bone. While most celestial bodies strive for the elegant simplicity of a sphere, this metallic giant features 2 rounded bulbous ends, connected by a narrower, elongated bridge of solid iron and nickel. This strange, almost artificial-looking symmetry suggests a violent and complex history of high-speed collisions and subsequent reaccumulation. Its surface is not a soft landscape of dust, but a hard, industrial-looking expanse that reflects radar waves with startling clarity and intensity. Standing on the bridge of this celestial bone, you would see the two massive rounded lobes looming at your horizons like twin mountains of polished ore. The sheer scale of this metallic oddity, stretching for over 130 miles, challenges our understanding of how gravity and centrifugal force negotiate the final form of a world. It is a lonely, structural masterpiece that refuses to conform to the standard planetary moulds of the inner system. In the cold dark, Cleopatra tumbles through the void, its strange silhouette casting long and irregular shadows against the distant tapestry of the Milky Way. Surprisingly, the perceived isolation of these wandering rocks is frequently an illusion, as many asteroids travel through the deep black with secret companions. The world named Ida was the first to reveal this intimate mystery when a passing spacecraft captured a tiny orbiting moonlet now known as Dactyl. This minuscule companion, measuring barely a mile across, circles its much larger parent in a delicate gravitational embrace that has lasted for millions of years. The discovery of this duo fundamentally shifted our perspective, proving that even the most humble fragments of the solar system can host their own miniature satellite systems. Dactyl is not a random neighbour passing in the night, but a dedicated partner that likely originated from the very same catastrophic impact that birthed Ida itself. They navigate the silent sea as a pair, a small family of two drifting far from the busy traffic of the planetary lanes. Looking at this partnership from afar, one is struck by the quiet dignity of such a small-scale gravitational bond. It reminds us that no matter how small or isolated a body might seem, it still possesses the power to draw others into its personal rhythm. This tiny moonlet serves as a silent witness to Ida's long journey, a small point of light tracing a protective circle around its scarred and ancient guardian. Deep within the more populated reaches of the belt, the asteroid Sylvia elevates this concept of companionship to a level of surprising complexity. This massive, bulky world does not merely host a single companion, but instead boasts a sophisticated triple system with two separate moons, Romulus and Remus, orbiting its centre. These moonlets follow their own unique intersecting paths, creating a miniature planetary system that operates with the clockwork precision of a much larger world. The existence of such a stable, multi-body system in the middle of a debris field is a testament to the enduring power of gravity to create order out of chaos. Sylvia acts as a heavy central anchor, its bulky mass providing enough pull to keep its two tiny charges from drifting away into the hungry void. It is a bustling, microscopic kingdom of stone and motion, a three-part harmony playing out in the absolute silence of the outer reaches. Notice how your own body is currently resting in its own stable orbit of comfort, supported by the soft and unmoving reality of your surroundings. Your breathing is slow and rhythmic, much like the predictable circling paths of those distant moonlets. Just as Sylvia holds its tiny companions in a steady and protective grip, you're held in the firm and gentle embrace of deep relaxation. This structure of partnership reaches a fascinating extreme in the objects known as contact binaries, which resemble giant celestial snowmen drifting through the cold. These unique worlds consist of two distinct independent spheres that have been brought together by a collision so slow and gentle that they simply touched and stayed. Instead of shattering or bouncing apart, they have formed a permanent physical union where they rest softly against one another without ever truly merging. The resulting shape is a strange, two-lobed entity that tumbles through the dark like a set of cosmic weights or a frozen winter figure. These binaries are the physical record of the most delicate interactions possible in the belt, where the velocities were so low that the touch was as soft as a whisper. They are the ultimate symbols of connection in the void, two separate histories that decided to become one in the face of the infinite night. To stand at the junction where these two worlds meet would be to witness a landscape of incredible geometric tension, where gravity pulls in two competing directions at once. The neck of such a snowman is often filled with a fine, powdery silt that has drifted into the low point over millions of years. It is a place of profound and unmoving touch, a silent and eternal kiss between two travellers who refuse to be alone. If we were to look closer at the world named Pallas, we would find a traveller that refuses to stay within the traditional flat boundaries of the solar system. While most of its neighbours follow a relatively level path around the Sun, Pallas travels on a highly tilted orbit that plunges far above and then far below the main planetary plane. This extreme inclination makes it a solitary outlier, a world that spends much of its time in the lonely empty spaces where almost no other asteroids dare to wander. Its journey is a majestic vertical loop that provides it with a unique and sprawling perspective on the rest of the flat, crowded belt. From its high vantage point, Pallas can look down upon the disk of the solar system, like a sentinel watching a distant rotating city of light. This lonely path is likely the result of a powerful gravitational scattering event that occurred in the very earliest days of our history. Your own thoughts are now like Pallas, rising above the flat concerns of the day and drifting into a wider, more peaceful perspective. Feel the weightless ease in your mind as you let go of the horizontal world and sink into the vertical depths of your own rest. You're a solitary traveller now, moving through a quiet and elevated state of being that is yours alone to explore. Surprisingly, the predictable rhythmic rotation we expect from a world is not a universal rule, as a few chaotic rotators spin erratically through the dark. These unique asteroids do not possess a single fixed axis of rotation, but instead tumble with their axes constantly shifting and wobbling in response to ancient gravitational tugs. Their movement is unpredictable and drunken, a complex and ever-changing dance that never repeats the same pattern twice. Looking at such a world would be a dizzying experience, as the stars in the sky would appear to move in wild, erratic loops rather than steady arcs. This chaotic motion is often the result of an irregular shape combined with a history of multiple, non-central impacts that knock the world out of its steady rhythm. It is a world that has never found its balance, a restless and tumbling spirit that refuses to settle into a predictable pace. Deep within the population of smaller, more anonymous rocks, there exist solid stones that spin with a speed that borders on the impossible. Some of these incredibly small asteroids complete a full rotation on their axis in a matter of mere minutes, their days passing in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. They are frantic, whirling dervishes of the deep belt, their surfaces a blurred landscape of stone moving at high velocity. This rapid motion creates intense centrifugal forces that would easily tear a larger, more fragile world into a million pieces. These fast spinners are often no larger than a city block, yet they possess a kinetic energy that makes them formidable participants in the asteroid dance. To stand on the equator of such a world would be to experience a constant outward pull that would make every grain of dust want to fly away into the black. The sheer speed of these rotations is a testament to the violent, high-energy environment of the belt's smaller inhabitants. They are the high-frequency vibrations in the solar system's grand symphony, moving too fast for human eyes to easily track. Their frantic pace stands in stark contrast to the slow and majestic turning of the giant planets, adding a layer of hidden intensity to the silent void. This structure of extreme rotation reveals a fundamental truth about the internal strength of these fast-spinning worlds. Unlike the loose and porous mountains of marbles found in the rubble pile populations, these fast spinners must be solid, monolithic crystals of rock. If they were made of loose boulders, the incredible outward force of their spin would have flung their components apart billions of years ago. Their very existence proves that they are single, unbroken fragments of solid stone, possessing the internal tensile strength required to hold themselves together against the push of the void. They are the tough, unyielding survivors of the belt's most extreme mechanical tests, forged from the densest and most durable minerals available. This structural integrity turns them into high-speed projectiles of solid rock, moving with a purpose and a strength that is entirely their own. Ground yourself once more in the solid and unmoving strength of your own body, feeling the unyielding support of the bed beneath you. You're as solid and secure as a monolithic stone. Your own internal structure finds a state of perfect and unbreakable peace. The frantic spinning of the distant rocks is merely a background hum, a far-off energy that only serves to highlight your own absolute and heavy stillness. Surprisingly, the asteroid Juno features a highly eccentric orbit that makes it a frequent and restless visitor across many different thermal zones. Its elliptical path brings it unusually close to the warm inner solar system, almost touching the orbit of Mars, before it swings far out again toward the freezing outer reaches of the belt. This wandering journey subjects Juno to a constant and rhythmic cycle of extreme temperature changes, as it moves from the sun-drenched inner regions to the dark and icy depths. This eccentricity makes Juno a bridge between two worlds, a traveller that knows both the heat of the inner planets and the deep freeze of the giant neighbours. Its surface must endure a constant slow-motion cycle of expansion and contraction as it moves through these differing environments over the course of its long year. It is a world that has never known a single stable climate, its destiny written in the elongated loop of its perpetual wandering. Watching Juno's path is like following a heartbeat that spans the width of the solar system, a slow and powerful pulse of motion that defines its entire existence. It reminds us that even within the belt there are travellers who refuse to be confined to a single narrow lane. Juno is a restless explorer of the void, its journey a testament to the diversity of paths available in the infinite night. If we were to look closer at the collective light reflecting from all these oddities and outliers, we would discover a hidden rainbow of subtle spectral compositions. Modern surveys have revealed that the belt is not a monochrome landscape of grey dust, but is instead painted with a vast palette of mineral colours that highlight the diverse origins of its inhabitants. We find reddish silicates, bluish basalts, and the deep matte black of carbonaceous stones all swirling together in the same orbital space. This spectral rainbow is the final proof that the asteroid belt is a grand and chaotic mixing bowl, filled with pieces of 1,000 different lost worlds. Some fragments originated in the hot inner forge near the sun, while others were cast inward from the frozen chemical nurseries of the outer giants. They have all come together here, in this vast and silent sea, to form a mosaic of cosmic history that spans the entire width of our solar system's birth. From that magnificent ancient mosaic of our solar system's birth, the belt has gradually transitioned into a state of profound and nearly eternal stillness. While the early eons were defined by a chaotic, crowded demolition derby of world-building fragments, the modern era of this debris field is characterized by an immense velvet quiet. Major collisions between the larger, mountain-sized inhabitants are now exceedingly rare, occurring perhaps only once every few million years across the entire vastness of the ring. This means that for the overwhelming majority of a rock's existence, its journey through the void is entirely undisturbed by the sudden, violent presence of a neighbour. The distance between the stones is so gargantuan that they drift for hundreds of generations in total serene isolation. They are solitary travellers in a sea of nothingness, moving through a peace that has lasted longer than the entirety of human history on our home world. When an impact does finally happen, it is a singular, world-shaking event that punctuates a silence of unimaginable duration. This lack of frequent kinetic interaction allows the belt to maintain its structure with a graceful, unhurried stability. It is a slow-motion clock where the seconds are measured in millions of circuits around the sun, and the strikes are few and far between. The surfaces of these ancient rocks serve as a dense, overlapping record of deep time that no terrestrial landscape could ever hope to preserve. Every square inch of exposed stone is slowly saturated with tiny microscopic craters caused by the relentless rain of micrometeorite impacts. These sand grain-sized bullets strike with incredible kinetic energy, carving out minute pits and pulverizing the crystalline surface into a fine, powdery regolith. This saturation is so complete that the original textures of the primordial rock are often buried beneath meters of impact-generated dust. It is a slow and steady process of erosion and accumulation that happens grain by grain, impact by impact, across the eons. The surface is not a static shield, but a living chronicle of the deep, dark history of the inner solar system. Surprisingly, the internal structure of these ancient boulders is being slowly dismantled by the simple, rhythmic passage of time and light. Thermal fracturing acts as a quiet, relentless sculptor that breaks apart the solid stone over the course of countless millennia. As an asteroid rotates, its rocky surfaces expand slightly under the direct glare of the distant sun and then violently contract in the sudden, freezing shade of the night side. This repetitive, mechanical stress eventually creates microscopic fissures that spiderweb through the mineral heart of the rock. Over eons, these tiny cracks widen until the massive boulders eventually split and crumble without a single external impact. It is a slow-motion shattering that happens in total silence, driven by the pulse of the star itself. Now, let your own body settle into the absolute stillness of your surroundings, feeling the slow and steady pulse of your own heart. Notice how the weight of your limbs is perfectly supported, allowing every muscle to release its hold and sink into the surface beneath you. Just as the asteroids respond to the slow cycles of heat and cold, you're responding to the calming rhythm of your own breath, drifting deeper into a state of total, unmoving peace. This gentle, nearly imperceptible thermal thrust is known to the scientific world as the Yarkovsky effect, and it quietly reshapes the map of the belt over the course of millions of years. As the dark, rocky surface absorbs the warming rays of the sun, it later radiates that energy back out into the void as infrared heat. Because of the asteroid's rotation, this heat emission is slightly offset from the incoming light, creating a minuscule but persistent force of propulsion. This whisper of a push is enough to slowly nudge an asteroid either closer to the sun or further out toward the giant planets. While the force is far too weak to be felt by a human passenger, its cumulative effect over millions of years is enough to move an entire mountain across millions of miles of empty space. It is a slow and graceful migration that ensures the population of the belt is never truly static. The light of the star is not just a source of illumination, but a patient, invisible hand that guides the destiny of every stone. This thermal drift is a masterpiece of orbital mechanics, a slow-motion sailing on a sea of radiation. Every rock is a vessel, its course being rewritten one photon at a time across the vastness of the deep black. This invisible thermal thrust acts as a massive cosmic conveyor belt, slowly but surely delivering asteroids toward the unstable zones known as the Kirkwood Gaps. Over millions of years, the Yarkovsky effect pushes smaller stones across the orbital plane until they eventually drift into these resonant regions. Once they cross the threshold into a gap, the overwhelming gravity of Jupiter takes hold and begins to violently warp their once peaceful paths. This process ensures that the belt is always in a state of slow-motion replenishment and loss, as stones are moved from stable regions into areas of gravitational chaos. It is a conveyor belt that moves at a pace that is fundamentally alien to our human perception of speed. We see the belt as a fixed ring, but it is actually a slow and steady stream of matter flowing toward the ultimate ejection seats of the solar system. The movement is so gradual that an observer could watch for 1,000 years and never notice a single rock change its position. Yet, on the scale of geological time, the belt is a bustling highway of drifting stone. It is a beautiful, mathematical cycle of delivery and departure that maintains the delicate balance of the inner system. It takes millions of eons for the relentless process of solar weathering to alter the fundamental crystalline structure of the exposed rock. The surfaces of asteroids are constantly bombarded by the solar wind and cosmic rays, which slowly degrade the minerals and change their chemical state. This weathering gradually erases the bright, fresh scars left by recent impacts, turning the surface into a uniform, weathered mask of deep, dark colour. If you were to see a crater that is only a few million years old, it would appear as a brilliant, reflective mark against the older, darker terrain. Over time, the solar radiation works like a slow-motion bleaching agent, softening the edges of the crater and darkening its floor until it matches its ancient surroundings. This process happens atom by atom, a microscopic erosion that eventually swallows every new feature back into the deep history of the stone. As you continue to breathe slowly and evenly, imagine the absolute patience of this solar erosion, a force that works across timescales that dwarf our entire civilization. You're perfectly relaxed, your own mind as calm and steady as the slow turning of a weathered rock. Every thought is softened, and every worry is smoothed away by the rhythmic, peaceful flow of your own rest. Gravitational interactions with the massive, distant planets introduce a subtle and persistent chaos into the orbits of every asteroid. While the paths of the stones seem predictable in the short term, the constant minuscule tugs from worlds like Jupiter and Saturn make long-term predictions mathematically impossible. Over millions of years, these tiny perturbations accumulate, causing the orbits to wobble and drift in ways that defy even our most sophisticated computer models. This inherent chaos means that the belt is a dynamic, living system where the future is never perfectly written. A stone that is in a stable orbit today might find itself on a completely different path 10 million years from now, due to the cumulative effect of these planetary nudges. It is a slow-motion dance with 1,000 partners, where the rhythm is constantly shifting in ways that are too subtle for us to perceive. This uncertainty is not a flaw in the system, but a fundamental property of the way gravity weaves the tapestry of the heavens. It provides a level of freedom and unpredictability to the belt, ensuring that the dance of time is always evolving. The stones are not just clockwork pieces, but individuals responding to the massive, invisible forces of the deep void. As they grind slowly against each other over the course of billions of years, the largest asteroids are being gradually reduced to gravel, sand, and eventually microscopic dust. Every collision, no matter how rare or small, contributes to the slow-motion pulverization of the belt's original massive building blocks. The Ring of Stone is effectively a massive cosmic grinding stone, slowly turning the remnants of a lost planet into a fine, ethereal mist of debris. This process of fragmentation ensures that the belt is populated by objects of every possible size, from massive dwarf planets down to individual grains of mineral silt. The larger rocks are the grandparents of the system, slowly giving way to a new generation of smaller and more numerous descendants. It is a cycle of grinding and dispersal that has been playing out since the very first day the nebula began to cool. The dust that we see reflecting the zodiacal light is the final beautiful result of this multi-billion-year process of destruction. It is the pulverized memory of worlds that were once whole, now spread as a thin and glowing veil across the path of the planets. The belt is always being refined, always being ground down into a softer and more delicate version of itself. Radioactive isotopes trapped deep within the rocky cores of these asteroids have long since decayed, leaving these bodies cold and geologically dead for billions of years. In the early, fiery days of the solar system, these isotopes provided the internal heat required to melt the rocks and create complex geological layers. Now, that ancient fire has completely faded, leaving the asteroids as frozen, inert tombs of stone that have not known internal warmth for eons. This lack of internal energy means that the asteroids have no volcanoes, no tectonic plates, and no ways to reshape their own surfaces from within. They are frozen in time, their physical states dictated entirely by the external forces of light, gravity, and impact. They are the cold hearts of the solar system, drifting in a state of absolute and permanent geological hibernation. To observe the asteroid belt is to watch a geological process moving so incredibly slowly that a human lifetime cannot perceive even a single frame of the action. The transformations that define this region, the thermal fracturing, the orbital drift, and the slow-motion grinding, unfold on a scale of time that makes our history seem like a fleeting flash of lightning. We are the ephemeral observers of a majestic, multi-billion-year performance that will continue long after our star has dimmed. This profound difference in timescale reminds us that we are part of a universe that operates with a patience and a scope that we can barely imagine. The belt is a masterpiece of endurance, a slow and silent ballet that plays out across the deep black with absolute confidence. It does not hurry, it does not change its pace, and it does not notice our presence as we gaze upon its silent stones. As you prepare now to move toward the final synthesis of your journey, let the weight of this cosmic time bring you a sense of ultimate and lasting peace. The eons are moving around you, but you are safely anchored in the present, drifting in the quiet sea of your own restoration. You are ready now for the grand realization, resting in the absolute silence of the infinite slow-motion night. The philosophical void sensory focus, the profound realization of our own world's delicate position amidst a gentle, eternal cosmic clockwork. Within the infinite slow-motion night, the asteroid belt stands as a haunting, majestic ghost of a planet that could never be born. This sprawling ring of debris is the spectral remainder of a terrestrial world whose labour was eternally interrupted by the overwhelming, relentless gravity of nearby Jupiter. Instead of coalescing into a single, unified sphere with its own continents and iron core, the primordial material remained forever scattered across the dark. It is a planetary ambition that was frozen in its infancy, a collection of bricks that were never permitted to form a house. The massive gravitational tides of the gas giant effectively shredded the dreams of this potential world, keeping the fragments in a state of permanent, frustrated separation. In this sense, the belt is the solar system's most profound tragedy, a monument to a world that exists only in pieces. This structure of unfulfilled potential serves as a quiet witness to the sheer power required to forge a lasting home in the void. We often think of space as a place of creation, but the belt reminds us that it is also a place of prevention and cosmic veto. It drifts as a silent reminder that for every world that achieves wholeness, there may be 1,000 that remain as nothing more than a lingering, dusty thought. Surprisingly, the very same gravitational authority that prevented this ghost planet from forming also acted as a vital, ancient shield for our own existence. Without the massive planet Jupiter operating as a relentless gravitational shepherd, the delicate history of our own homeworld might have been tragically brief. Thousands of these wandering rocks, currently locked in stable orbital lanes, would have otherwise spiraled inward to devastate the early fragile Earth. The gas giant's immense reach effectively cleared the path for our terrestrial development, either swallowing rogue fragments or flinging them safely out toward the stars. We owe our current serenity to this distant, heavy guardian that has spent eons maintaining the order of the inner solar system. It is a protective choreography that has allowed life to bloom in a pocket of relative safety, far from the chaotic firing line of the main debris field. These unformed planetary building blocks offer a profoundly humbling reminder of the chaotic and destructive origins of our own serene biosphere. Every jagged fragment and dusty boulder drifting in the dark is a representative of the raw, violent energy that once defined the entire inner solar system. We look upon these rocks and see the unpolished, unrefined version of the ground beneath our own feet, a raw material that never reached its final, habitable state. Our lush forests and deep blue waters are merely the lucky survivors of a period of unimaginable celestial bombardment and transformation. The asteroids are the leftovers that escaped the melting pot of planetary creation, remaining in their original brutal state for billions of years. They provide the necessary context for our own existence, highlighting the extreme rarity of a world that successfully transitions from rubble to garden. Accepting this history allows us to see the deep beauty in the stability of our own environment. While the asteroids remain locked in a state of eternal rocky suspension, our world has moved through the fire to become something entirely different. They are the frozen ancestors of our soil, the raw materials of a project that, in our case, reached a spectacular and life-bearing completion. Deep within the profound realization of this vastness, the immense emptiness between the stones forces us to completely recalibrate our earthly intuition about distance and matter. We are accustomed to a world where physical objects are crowded together, where space is filled with air and substance and light. Out here, the void is so absolute, and the distance is so unbridgeable that the very concept of a solid ring of rock begins to dissolve into a landscape of near-total absence. A traveller moving through the belt would spend weeks or months surrounded by absolutely nothing, seeing only the distant, unchanging stars as companions. This overwhelming absence of matter serves as a powerful corrective to the crowded, bustling maps we draw of our own terrestrial neighbourhood. It is geography of the vacuum, where the gaps between things are infinitely more significant than the things themselves, and matter is the rarest of exceptions. As you consider this staggering empty scale, let your own body become a small, peaceful anchor in the middle of that infinite dark. Feel the weight of your head against the pillow and the slow rhythmic expansion of your chest, noting how solid and safe your own physical presence feels in this moment. You are a concentrated spark of matter and awareness, resting securely while the vast silent void stretches out for millions of miles in every direction. We are literally built from the same stardust and heavy elements that were discarded during the messy, violent birth of the sun. The water you drink tonight may have once been locked in the icy mantle of a carbonaceous wanderer, before being delivered to the early Earth by a lucky collision. This profound molecular connection erases the distance between us, making the belt feel like a far-off part of our own extended family. To look at the asteroid belt is to look into a mirror of our own elemental past, seeing the raw stuff of our world drifting in its original form. We are not separate from the debris of the solar system. We are simply the part of that debris that has gathered together to breathe and think. The rocks are our silent cousins, carrying the same atomic signatures that define our blood and our bones. This cosmic structure is not a collection of threats lurking in the dark, but should be viewed instead as a stable and peaceful museum of the solar system's earliest era. Within this vast circular gallery, the artifacts of planetary formation are kept in a state of perfect, airless preservation that would be impossible on any active geological world. Every cratered surface and mineral grain is an original, unaltered exhibit from a time before the Earth had even finished its first cooling. Walking among these stones would be a journey through a heritage that belongs to every living thing in our cosmic neighbourhood. The belt acts as a silent archivist, protecting the evidence of our origins from the eroding effects of time, weather, and the busy chemistry of life. It is the only place in the universe where we can still touch the raw, unedited, rough draft of our own existence. This museum does not require a caretaker or a power source, as it is maintained by the eternal laws of physics and the cold vacuum of space. It remains open and unchanging for billions of years, a testament to the stability that can be found even in a region born of violence. It is a sanctuary of deep time, a place where the history of the sun is written in stone and kept for anyone who cares to look. Surprisingly, the long-term destiny of these objects reminds us that the slow decay of their orbits highlights the subtle impermanence of even the most seemingly eternal structures in the heavens. Nothing in the belt is truly fixed forever. Every rock is subject to the patient, unyielding tug of gravity and the gentle pressure of light. Over millions of years, orbits that seem stable are gradually shifted, leading to quiet ejections into the sun or the dark gulfs beyond the planets. This realization reminds us that the universe is in a constant, if imperceptibly slow, state of flux and reorganization. Even the stars we use as landmarks are drifting, and the rocks of the belt are part of a grand migration that spans the lifetime of the galaxy. The structures we perceive as permanent are merely snapshots of a process that is far larger and more fluid than a human mind can easily grasp. Embracing this impermanence allows us to find a deeper peace in the present moment, accepting the slow dance of the heavens as our own. We are part of a moving, changing system, a beautiful and temporary arrangement of matter in a universe that is always reinventing itself. The slow decay of an orbit is not a failure, but a natural part of the rhythmic and eternal breathing of the cosmos. Studying these fractured and ancient worlds helps humanity to truly understand the extreme vulnerability of our own fragile oasis floating in the same dark sea. When we see the deep scars on Vesta, or the hollow interior of a rubble pile, we're reminded of how delicate the balance of a habitable world truly is. Our planet is a rare and precious miracle, a place where the conditions for life have been maintained against staggering mathematical odds. The belt serves as a nearby reminder of the harsh, unforgiving environment that exists just beyond the thin veil of our atmosphere. It teaches us that peace is a hard-won condition, requiring a complex and lucky arrangement of gravitational shields and thermal stability. By observing the battered remains of these failed planets, we learn to cherish the resilience and the beauty of our own blue home. As you sink further into the soft, welcoming depths of your rest, feel a profound sense of gratitude for the safety and the comfort of your surroundings. Your room is a sanctuary, your bed is a harbour, and you are shielded from the vast and cold realities of the deep belt by the strength of our own world. You can let go of all concerns, resting in the knowledge that you are part of a protected and life-bearing world that has survived the eons to provide you with this moment of peace. Surprisingly, the silent ballet of these rocks continues exactly as it has for eons, performing with a majestic indifference to the entire rise and fall of human civilizations on Earth. While empires have been built, wars have been fought, and languages have been forgotten, the asteroids have continued their slow and rhythmic march around the Sun without a single deviation. They do not care about our triumphs or our tragedies. They are answerable only to the ancient, immutable laws of the universe. To contemplate this silent ballet is to step outside of time for a brief and beautiful moment. We can lose ourselves in the slow, circular motion of the stones, finding a sense of perspective that makes our own lives feel more precious and our problems more manageable. It is a grand and indifferent peace, a cosmic theatre that offers a seat to anyone who is willing to be still and watch. In their dusty, frozen silence, the asteroids hold the forgotten memories of the violent forge that ultimately created us all. Every grain of mineral and every metallic core is a piece of the original fire, a remnant of a time when the solar system was a churning cloud of superheated gas and molten stone. They are the survivors of a creative explosion so massive that it birthed the very concept of solid ground and heavy atmosphere. By looking at them, we are looking at our own elemental origin story, written in the language of physics and preserved in the deep freeze of the vacuum. They carry the energy of that first forge within their cold hearts, a legacy of heat and pressure that has been silenced by the passage of time. They are the quiet evidence of a loud and fiery past, a peaceful conclusion to a chaotic beginning. This final realization brings us back to the start of our journey, closing the circle of our understanding of the belt. We began in the vast and silent sea, and we end in the violent forge, having seen the entire history of our neighbourhood reflected in the stones of the belt. The asteroids are the guardians of our history, the silent keepers of the memories that made us who we are, resting now in a sleep that will last as long as the sun. We are not separate from the asteroid belt. We are made of the exact same stardust, simply gathered on a rock fortunate enough to have awakened and looked back. The grand synthesis. This final realization reveals that we are not truly separate from the silent drifting stones of the asteroid belt. We are composed of the exact same ancient stardust, simply gathered together on a unique rock that was fortunate enough to have awakened and looked back. Every atom in your body was forged in that same violent creative fire, surviving billions of years to become the awareness that now seeks rest. Deep within this understanding, your journey through the heavens now draws to a gentle close. If we were to look closer at the edges of your awareness, the vast distances of the belt begin to blur into the soft textures of your immediate surroundings. Surprisingly, the body responds to this cosmic perspective by seeking a deep and absolute stillness of its own. Focus your attention now on your toes, letting the long journey of the stones fade into the background. Feel the weight of your feet settling into the mattress, releasing any remaining tension from the day's travels. The ankles and calves become heavy, sinking into the support beneath you like ancient relics resting in a quiet, dark sea. This quiet room is a sanctuary where the laws of motion are replaced by the laws of rest. Let the relaxation move upward through your knees and into your thighs, feeling the muscles go limp and soft. Your hips are now firmly anchored, grounded by the steady, unmoving reality of the bed. The lower back and stomach area find their own rhythm, rising and falling with the slow regularity of a natural pulse. As the tension leaves your spine, imagine the vertebrae settling into place like fragments finding their final, stable position. Your hands and fingers feel warm and heavy, resting perfectly still on the soft fabric of the sheets. This quiet room is now your entire world, a place of soft shadows and absolute safety. Every breath you take is a slow and effortless wave of calm, drawing you further away from the waking world. The surface of the bed is a firm and loving foundation, accepting the full weight of your shoulders and neck. A profound silence has settled over your mind, leaving only the steady, comforting sound of your own breathing. Every muscle in your face is now completely relaxed, from the forehead to the temples to the very tips of your ears. You are a masterpiece of stillness, a living expression of the peace that exists when all motion has ceased. The covers are a warm and protective layer, holding the heat of your body in a gentle embrace. Darkness is a kind and welcoming friend, inviting you to let go of the last remaining threads of thought. You're drifting into a sea of perfect, undisturbed slumber, where the only reality is the soft texture of sleep. And now 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.